Well, we return for our weekly Cricket Manager Career Mode series, and unfortunately, I think we're going to have to make a pretty big decision today because I've played through about half of the season. We've got to the end of June with Yorkshire, and while things have been going very well on the pitch, we've been getting great results. We're top of the tables. We got to the semi finals in the T20 Slam, and players are playing well. There are a lot of concerns with career mode that we've got to discuss, chief among which many of the things that it said were going to be features of it just haven't happened, which are obviously a big problem. But also some of the other elements, which I can show you examples of, are perhaps not working as well. So I think unfortunately we've learned in the last 3 weeks that this is maybe not ready for a long-term career series yet. But let's go and take a look at how we've been going anyway, explain some of the problems I've been having, and then we'll probably wrap the series up at the end of today's episode and maybe return with a player career, which we know is far more enjoyable when the new year comes around. Let's go and get into it and see how Yorkshire have been getting on. Yes, hello, welcome along to the third and unfortunately probably the final part of this Cricket 26 Management Career Mode series from Yorkshire with me, Daniel. We have come back today to reflect on what has been a few months of play since you were last with me. Lots of results, lots of competitions on the go, some job offers we received a couple of months ago very early on too, but also to reflect on a number of features that maybe aren't quite as they were explained to be, and maybe some problems that will cause this to not be a long-term series moving forward. So if you're looking forward to all of that, it's almost going to end up becoming a long-term review of this save now and this career mode feature. And please do put a thumbs up on it. But let's start today with a little reflection on how things are going at Yorkshire, and B, some of the things that we maybe expected to see or have seen that perhaps have worried me and stopped me continuing this long term, because I felt like I have to be honest if I'm going to call it quits early on this save. It's not something I generally do on the channel. So let's go and have a look at the calendar first, because we've been playing for a couple of months, and you can see if we go back through the months here, let's go back to where we were, because we started all the way back in March. We played the first two games, didn't we, on camera? We won both of those. We won our first couple of one-day games. We won our next four-day game. It all started pretty swimmingly. The usual suspects in form, and we'll come back to form. That's a big discussion in a moment. Then a mix of victories and defeats as we got towards the short forms of the game. And the first little concern started to crop up. Where we had a lot of games scheduled in quick succession, you were picking the team for the second game before you were playing the first. So when you were making decisions based on fitness, it was almost impossible to decide because, for example, let's say here where we play 3 T20s in successive days, which probably wouldn't happen anyway. The scheduling's a little bit off here. In fact, we play 5 in 6 days, which is just ridiculous. But we were picking the squad, or the 11, sorry, the lineup, for this second match against Essex and for the third match against Kent before we were playing the match the day before. So we then got into the third match, and the fitness for some of the people was 50-60%, even though when I picked them, they were up in the 80s or in the early 90s because they then played 2 matches in 2 days after. So that was definitely the first big concern that cropped up, as well as some of the scheduling, which is all over the shop, especially going from Somerset to Headingley the following day, things that just weren't happening in real life. So definitely concerns there, albeit we still did pretty well. We only lost a few matches. We got to the semis of the T20 Blast, where we lost to Surrey before losing to them again in the 4-day cricket. And that was the last 2 fixtures. But we sort of got the guide a little bit earlier that due to the scheduling, if you're going to have a career mode where your selection of your team is based largely on fitness and fatigue and morale and form, A, you can't pick them before the previous match because how on earth do you know what the form and the fatigue is going to be like? And B, you can't have big scheduling issues like this because 3 matches in 3 days is always going to lead to problems when it comes to things like selection for fatigue, because how do you know what situation your bowler's going to be in 2 days later, etc. So that's the first of the concerns. We'll come back to some of the others on the scheduling front in a moment. But overall, performances, results were pretty good. I can show you a few things, so such as in the County Cup, Harry Brook is the second top scorer in the County Championship at the minute. We've also got Moriarty, the spinner, 5th on the bowling figures. Interesting. All of them spinners, some of them who can't even get in real life at the moment, but also some of the averages very, very low. If we go through to the standings at the moment, in Division 1, we are top of the tree. We've won 5, lost 1, same as Surrey. That was our only defeat, of course. And the net run rate is very good. The points on the board is great. Performance-wise, I can't fault what's been going on. The batting statistics are excellent. We've got the likes of Harry Brook and Joe Root right up the top, as you would imagine. There's no surprises with the people that are up there. Shah Massoud, the other opener, up past 300 as well. So with Adam Life just behind, we've got a lot of players performing pretty well. And despite that, the form may suggest otherwise when you go and look at the statistical data, which again is a bit of a problem, but we'll look at that in a moment. On the bowling front, we've had to rotate a little bit more, but Moriarty as the spinner in first-class cricket has done really well. And we've obviously had a couple of other seamers that have done all right as well. So Matt Milnes has picked up 30 wickets already. And there are some other big names up there as well. Not so many from our point of view, as the other bowlers have rotated a little bit more. I think Boris Carroll is the next one with 16 wickets. So no real standouts there. But let's go back a little bit, because we want to have a look at some of the other problems we've encountered and why this probably can't be a long-term save for me, and why I'm finding it a little frustrating. Because if we have a look at what's been happening in the last couple of months at the inbox and the news and at the squad management, I want to first highlight things such as the scout reports, which have been okay, to be honest. They're pretty clever in the way they're written. They give you detailed information without taking up loads of writing, so that's a positive. However, there's no real recommendations based on it. It's just a very simple, they've done well, then they've not done well, then they've done well. But you don't really get a way of keeping up with them. So it could be, my suggestion probably for an addition to this would be another paragraph at the bottom to say, this now means that this player has played this many matches this season, their average is this, from this many balls, this many runs, whatever. Because there's a lot of individual match ones, but you don't then see what the seasonal average is, what the player's form is overall. You're just seeing lots of one-all matches. And actually, if you want to keep tabs of it, you're having to write it down on a piece of pen and paper or keep a spreadsheet yourself, which is not particularly helpful, if I'm being honest. So unfortunately, that feature is good in terms of the way the data is presented for the individual match, but there's no correlation of, for a player you're watching long-term, well, how are they actually getting on generally, other than just keeping up with their reports on a match-by-match basis. On the squad management note, we found probably a few more problems. Now, I've got to show you the form here for a few reasons, because you've just seen Harry Brook is the second top scorer in the county championship. He was in the top 6 for average when it came to the T20 Blast, and his form is marked as 2 arrows down as a negative, despite being the second top scorer in the first class team at the moment. Can somebody make sense of that for me? I cannot find any example where the form here correlates in the slightest to what's happening. So Adil Rashid, for example, has only been playing in the shorter form for me. He was the top wicket taker in the T20 group stage, and he has got loads of wickets in the first couple of one-day games, and he's got a negative form as well. Make it make sense. The form and the arrows, they're a lovely graphic. They're very easy. They're very clear to see. But apparently, everyone's out of form. They do not correlate with the results and the performances whatsoever. It's so weird. We've also got nobody in good form, despite the fact that we've won nearly every match, and we've got some incredible averages on the batting and bowling front this year. I really am finding it a bit bizarre and hard to keep up with, because when you're relying on a management career mode, you need those things to be correct. You need to know what the form is like clearly. You need to know what morale is like clearly, and fitness is a whole nother issue, which we'll get to in a minute. But overall, really finding that difficult to comprehend at the minute. Let's talk about fitness as well, because while it has recovered now after a couple of weeks off, during that T20 spell where the scheduling was all over the place, it was really difficult. Batsmen were losing their fitness and their conditioning a lot quicker than the bowlers, which was something I found a little bit bizarre. Potentially in a longer form, you can understand why it's the other way round, and it does seem weird to me that the bowlers are losing more from a T20 match than they are from doing 30 overs in a test match, or a first class game. Does seem a little odd. There's also a slight problem here, and you've seen it where we've dropped Joe Root out due to fitness in the last game. You can't set your captain here. You can only set your lineup, your wicket keeper, and your 2 bowlers. So without setting the captain, we're ending up with some weird and wonderful people leading the side, which is having a remarkable change on results, unless you go through a fair few different drops and people coming in and out to make it work. So I don't know why that button's gone, because I'm pretty sure that it would be there as an option. Or is it just because they're so used to it being player career mode, where when you'd become the captain, you wouldn't have to select that, you'd just be in charge of everything else? Is it simply an omission that they've forgotten about having added manager career? A simple button that could solve an awful lot. But fitness has become the biggest issue, because one of the concerns I saw is not that actually fitness was declining, because that was actually quite a good thing. We were needing to rotate a little bit, or so it looked, players in sort of 50-60% condition. But then I went and played a couple of matches right at the end, once I knew that I probably wasn't going to be continuing with this, so a couple of T20s, just to see whether or not you would be able to play better with better conditioning, or whether you would be best served keeping your best players in the team who were absolutely knackered. So I picked an opener deliberately who hadn't been playing, who had 100% condition, and Johnny Bairstow, I think at the time, was at about 55. And I thought, well, surely that's going to affect things such as run speed, ball striking power, consistency, concentration, confidence, those things. No impact. So while the conditioning is there, it maybe affected the bowling speed slightly on a couple of the bowlers. So I had Jasprit Bumrah in the T20s and he was bowling slightly slower, but we didn't make him any less effective. But in the batting lineup, it didn't make any difference whatsoever. I thought the run speed would be a little slower and things, but it just didn't seem to show. And that's something that even in player career, as you got more fatigue, the run rate became a bit slower. It was harder to get between the wickets. So that really worried me a little bit as well. The other side of the game, and the thing that's concerning there, is the features we were told were going to be in here. Injuries. Not had one. And we're playing, 3 matches in 3 days consistently. We played nearly every calendar day of June, and there are some bowlers that played every day of that. Played down to 50-60% condition. Not one injury, not one strain, not one bit of fatigue, nothing. No injury alerts whatsoever. That's a feature that we were told would be in the game. No weather, which is something that's been in previous games. Certainly the Don Bradman crickets and Cricket 19, you had rain delays. Not happened at all in this save yet. I find it hard to believe it won't have rained once in 3 months in Yorkshire. And then the other thing is internationals. We talked about the calendar, building a squad. Were you going to get weaker? Were you going to have to juggle things when players went on international duty and that? Hasn't happened. And I don't get that again, because in player career, if an international game clashed with a first class game, you would miss it. And you would only play the international match. And then you'd find out what the results were for your county when you got back. But in manager career, that doesn't happen. And that's something that was already in the game. So I find it really bizarre that the likes of Harry Brook, Joe Root, they've not been away once. Or if they are playing, they're losing condition, but they're not actually missing the days they should be playing for us. There doesn't seem to be any link between international and club or county career here. There seems to be no overlap whatsoever. We've not lost any players for any day. We've not had anyone unavailable at any point. Just a drop in conditioning and bizarre drops in form, despite the fact certain players are playing well. And actually, some of the best rated players here in terms of form, the ones who are pretty average, like your Hodges and that, have had the worst form of the season. So it just seems to be that the options are there for the sake of it, but they don't correlate to the information at all, which is a little bit unfortunate, it must be said. In terms of the game itself, it actually looks quite good when it's playing, and that's why I'm intrigued to do a player career mode, starting at club cricket, doing it the old school way, which we really enjoy. But overall, I've got to say, for management career, despite some of the things looking quite good up front, and the features they said looking great, some of them just aren't there, and some of them have been really disappointing or don't match what they should do in terms of data. So very disappointed in the end, because it's not going to make for a long-term career. There's not enough interest and intrigue. There's not that development of youngsters, because you've got all of your international players there all year round. There are a couple of little nice touches that have come along with patches, and I should mention them as well. I don't just want to go for negatives. We've tried to include more recovery training, which does have a positive impact on recovery of condition, but when you've got 3 matches in 3 days, it makes no difference because you're playing anyway. But some of the things I do like when you're selecting your squads, for example, is that you've got the option now to see overseas players with a little tick when you're picking your 16, which wasn't there at the start. So a few little quality of life things that have been added from patches. But overall, there's just not enough to make it work, unfortunately. If you go to the club roster, there is information for some of the other players that are about, but again, those that we've kept tabs on, we're not really getting a great deal of information. And it just worries me that there's not going to be that longevity to a save, because if you're not ever getting injuries, you're not ever having international players, how are you ever going to be changing your squad around that much? And even then, to change outside your 16 is quite difficult, which is something that perhaps should be made easier in the game too. So overall, I was a little bit disappointed on that front. One of the things I did find weird though, and it's always been my criticism of like EAFC, is job selections, because you can see that our managerial reputation has shot up quickly after just 3 months of county management. Within a month, we had offers for the women's 100, for women's international teams, and for some other men's county championship teams before we'd even managed our fourth or fifth match, which I found a little bit odd. So it just seems that it's all happening a bit too quick and it's gone a little bit too easily. So a little bit worried about the future of it without greater additions and without getting some of the data right, because at the moment, some of the graphics, like the form one in particular, are almost all but pointless. So unfortunately, as a result of that, I don't think we can continue with this save, because despite a few nice touches and features, there isn't enough to make it a long-term management career. And a lot of the things that would provide that challenge just aren't there. And some of them were ones that were said to be there in the features. So a little bit disappointed overall. I'd be intrigued to see how you feel it's going as well. I guess it would be quite fun if you're doing the playing as well, like you would doing sort of a FIFA manager career or whatever. But on that front, you would still lose players to internationals. You'd still have injuries and things, and they're just not in the game. So it's always pretty much the same 11 when you're playing in a certain competition. So work to do, a nice base, but there's not enough to make this a long-term career. And that's why we are going to leave it after this episode, and we are going to go back to player career, which is what we've done in some of the previous games. We've largely done it on Twitch before. We're going to do a mix here. We're going to get through as much of a career as possible, starting at club cricket and working our way up. And hopefully, as a batsman, we'll be able to build up and get to the top level. We're not going to do bowling or all-rounder because I don't want it to take too long. From batting, you're just controlling that side of the innings, and then we can simulate the rest and not worry about catches and things in the field. So that's what we're going to return with in a couple of weeks after Christmas. We'll talk about it a bit more later in the month. But unfortunately, I just don't think there's a point in continuing this manager career, because there's not enough for me to make these Saturdays interesting. And I don't want to bore you for 20 minutes a day for the sake of it. So we're going to come back, play a career in the new year after a couple of weeks off for Christmas, and of course the new year too. The Ashes is going underway, so we will maybe come back and revisit that at some point too. But if you did enjoy this mini-series, which ended up almost being a 3-part review of management career, then please do put a thumbs up on it. Apologies if you were enjoying it, but I just think it was going to get very samey and very boring as we went along. So I want to focus on playing as well. And a few of you have been here before, know we've had some mixed fortune with that when I'm trying to multitask. If you want to stay up to date with it and make sure you don't miss a thing when that starts in the new year, subscribe and turn that notification bell on. In the meantime, note there is plenty more to come from FM26. Our long-term weekly save started last Sunday. That's with Bert and Albion. You can find that up in the eye above. There's also going to be regular live streams on Twitch and new episodes every weekday from our Build a Nation save at Real 1879. All of those playlists and some FM26 guides up in the eye above. More Cricket 26 to come soon. I hope you'll come and join me for it. Thank you for joining along for what ended up being a surprise mini-series. In the end, just not quite enough to get it going. Room for improvement for Cricket 26 and the management career mode. Maybe if they make more features in the future, we'll be able to revisit it at some point too. But for now, just not possible. So we're going to leave it there for now. And I'll see you in a new year for a brand new player career mode instead.